This is exciting from somebody in the real estate business who builds buildings for manufacturers and people that need warehouses to hear about the advancements and how good this state is doing. One of the challenges that I did not hear anybody talk about is the cost of energy, cost of electricity, which we have some very expensive pipes coming into Massachusetts. And second thing is sort of an outlying issue called healthcare. And so manufacturers have to worry about those costs as well. Can you comment on those? I'd like to hear from the businesses. Thank you.
Energy is obviously for manufacturing is very critical. In plastic molding, it's actually our highest expense. It's more than paying for health insurance for all our employees. So if there was a way to do it where we could get lower energy, we would take it. I want to point out that you'll notice a whole bunch of Massachusetts companies now moving to Devons because of a quirk in how the town was set up, and their energy cost is about 25% of what everybody else pays. So if Devons can do it, why can't we just arbitrarily lower it down for everything? So I don't know how to do it, but I can tell you that at $70,000+ a month with only 100 employees, it does make me scratch my head and say, why am I not in New York? And unfortunately, that's just the way it is.
So in biotech manufacturing, I would say energy is maybe about 10% of the product cost in that range. A couple of companies I work with at Wyeth, we actually did a collaboration with an arrangement with a local distribution company to, well, first I have to say we install co-generators because in our industry we need electricity and we need steam. So cogeneration is an economical way to generate both of those. And then we work with a local distribution company to actually run a gas pipeline right to our site, and they used it to serve other customers. So we were able to get a decent price on natural gas. And then I can comment on Devons from when I was at VMS. Yeah, basically you have, it's not called a town, I can't remember what it's called, but it's an entity that's run by a branch of the executive branch of the government, and they basically buy their own natural gas. They generate their energy, and so through managing that closely and maybe cutting out some middlemen, they're able to have lower energy costs there. So that's how they do it. But it's a pretty unique situation, but a good model.
Anything further? Just leave it to.
In competing with China, everybody needs to keep in mind that the Chinese government built the dam, Three Gorges Dam, and now the electricity is essentially free. So in plastic molding, it's a little tough to compete with a guy where his single highest cost is free. We all buy the same plastics from the same sources. We all pay the same money on that. Everything's automated, so it's not the personnel. It's cost of capital, which I thought was very interesting, was brought up there at the end, that the Chinese government is, of course, giving loans, and then you pay them back, maybe. And then you don't have to pay for electricity. So we're successfully doing it. We're successfully competing with China and winning, but energy. That's our goal.
And healthcare costs. Not so much. That's enough.
Well, I think enough said on the energy front, obviously important to all of us. I will say, though, that when we're competing for talent, the healthcare offering is super important, right? You know, we are out there in a battle every day to get the top engineers and the top technicians and you name it. And thankfully we've got some great schools in this area between WPI and Northeastern and MIT and such to pick from. But to attract that talent, you really do have to have kind of top-notch healthcare plans, and obviously the cost can be prohibitive on that.
Obviously, with more natural gas coming in, we're going to see, we hope, some stabilization in energy prices and maybe a decline. There's some discussions now bringing in clean hydro from Quebec. So there may be some help along the way. I think there are people who are very worried about this and are starting to think hard about what can be done. Another question?
So, observation and question. It's great to hear this discussion about talent and great to hear all of these manufacturers talk in such a positive tone about where we are in this country and where we are in Massachusetts from a standpoint of competitiveness in manufacturing, because we need to be. But the discussions like this are going on in every other state and every other country with an energy that is all about fire in the belly, and we have to be competitive from a cost perspective, from a talent perspective, and they're throwing resources at it like crazy. So my first question is, are we really competitive? And second question is, what policies or what things need to change? You talked about energy and things like that. What policies need to change to make sure that we are? Thanks.
It's a very good point, and I hope in my presentation made it clear that it's a highly competitive world out there, and it's not just competitive on cost, it's competitive on talent. That's really, I think, what we've seen in emerging in, certainly in Asia and other parts of the world. There's been an enormous amount of focus, I think, that we're unprecedented on advanced manufacturing at the policy level. If you've seen what the Obama administration has done, the investments that are being made now in these National Manufacturing Innovation Institutes. So I think we're thinking very strategically about this. I would think about this in one way, which is from a national level, we are very involved in funding R&D. We do a great job, relatively good job of funding R&D. We have not done that so much in fields related to advanced manufacturing, and that's what there's a shift now to try and do that with these National Manufacturing Innovation Institutes. So create investments in the new technology that help develop the capabilities. But that's all about technology push. That's about pushing from here. We also need the technology pull. We need ways in which we're creating the demand or creating the opportunities for companies to use this technology and then to develop it and sell broadly. And that's the part that I think as a state and as a country we're starting with investments on the R&D side. I think that's great. We also need to pull on the other side. One of the areas that we're working on in that is clearly tax policy. That's been a big issue for certainly for large corporates. The U.S. corporate tax issue is an issue where people are trying to address that in modest but important ways, and I think that is another important policy area. So the R&D investment, the tax policy, and then obviously on the talent side, we have a lot going on for community college and for education from a policy point of view. I think all of those are kind of frontier areas that will help us compete globally.
Just to expand on that a little bit, the tax policy, and this is really at the national or international level, is a factor. That's nothing to do with manufacturing competence and technology competence. It's something that happens at the enterprise level. So that's certainly a factor in high tech. Apple, I think the last month, the greatest example of that is Apple. And if you paid attention to the business news, what happened with them and the kind of tax rates they pay, and they're following the law, but they're not paying very much taxes. So that is tax policy at the national and international level. That's a factor that makes anyone in the United States not so competitive. And then, as I said in my remarks, I do think that in cutting edge manufacturing and innovative manufacturing, where the technology is changing at a rapid rate, Massachusetts is truly competitive. That's our niche, that's our strength. I think as the industry matures and gets more stagnant, then we're not as competitive, at least in my industry.
I think, just a brief comment, and it came out in our first report, the very first thing to get fire in the belly is to pay attention to something. And if you go back 5 years ago when we wrote that first report, nobody was really paying much attention to manufacturing, at least the way we used to in the 50s and the 60s and after World War II. We started seeing a lot of attention paid for it. I like to think that our report helped push that a little bit. The governor here has been a major advocate for manufacturing. But if you go back not to this State of the Union address, but to President Obama's State of the Union address 2 years ago, he mentions manufacturing 23 times in his State of the Union address and spent more time discussing the need for America becoming a manufacturing country again than he devoted to foreign policy. So that's the first step. And then when you get things like the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative here, we had the director of the National Institute of Standards here yesterday, NIST and Technology, which are now focusing not just on R&D, but manufacturing. At MIT, your president has been deeply involved with within the nation. That's the first step of bringing us back to the point where we all begin to realize the importance of your industry. And I'm very, very excited about that. Indeed, when we finished our report in 2007, we said we may be on the verge of getting over what I call the Rodney Dangerfield syndrome, an industry that got no respect. And getting respect is the first step.
What we struggle with more, being in Boston, obviously you've got a large pool from all the colleges that are here. So from an engineering standpoint, a technical standpoint, we don't struggle as much. Where I struggle personally is finding that machinist, that guy that works on a lathe, that can do fabrication, that can do plastic welding. Obviously the firms might be a little bit different than what we deal with, but have you found some of that same, because that's the pool that's disappearing. I mean, everybody wants to go to school. Nobody wants to be a tradesman.
I agree with the age issue that everybody's discussed. I think you go in a tool room anywhere in America, you'll see that. I think that one of the core cultural problems we have as a country is that manufacturing is not cool. And maybe if they did more, instead of LA Law, it was LA Manufacturing, we'd have more kids wanting to do it. But aside from that, we actually have had a lot of success getting CNC machinists lately. And I think it's coupled with the fact that there's been all these guys that for years have been driving all the way down inside of 128, so sorry, we're stealing your guys, but they don't want to do that anymore. They'd rather be closer to home, they'd rather be closer to family, so we've not had a problem with that. The sort of interesting twist is we've had a recent uptick for need for polishing, which is a real art. You're trying to get that shine on that orthopedic implant, and that's actually where the current gap is for us. But we have a great human resources department. I'm sure they're going to find the people.
Just a little footnote to that. As I told you, I grew up in Detroit. I went to an inner city high school, Mumford High School, made famous by Eddie Murphy and Beverly Hills Cop. And I was a college prep school student, and I, of course, went on to college. But in my high school, besides taking English and history and physics, biology, and chemistry, I had 2 years of industrial drawing. This is before computers, so the first was freehand and the second was with triangles and T-squares. I had a semester of machine shop and I had a semester of print shop, where at the age of 16 I printed my own business cards. Now I have a son who's 21 years old. I started a little late. He's at a very prestigious university in the Midwest. He went to a very fine private school in Cambridge. And I think if it weren't for me, he wouldn't know the difference between a flathead and a Phillips head screwdriver. It's just not done anymore. I'm wondering if I could follow up on your question, whether any of you have been working with any of the vocational technical schools or community colleges, and whether that's providing a feeder into your firms.
We work with Mount Wachusett Community College and Mono Wachusett Tech. They've been great feeders for us. We have a co-op program for CNC operators. You get a kid in there a couple days a week for a few hours. It's been great. I just wish there were more kids going through those programs. We have a ton of machinists there. Extremely enthusiastic, new ideas. It actually takes all the older guys in the shop and they sort of light up because they got this kid who seems they can't ask enough questions, and I think it lifts the whole place. In Central Mass, we have those two schools are doing a fantastic job. I can't talk enough about Mount Wachusett or Mono Wachusett Tech. They're both fabulous and they really feed into that for us.
That's been one of our successes. We do work with the vocational schools a lot. In fact, a couple of our supervisors actually stay involved from an alumni standpoint, going back and keeping those relationships. But if you could find me a warehouse picker, that'd be great.
Further?
Non-robot.
Grace?
Yeah, very, very similar situation in biotech manufacturing, going back 20 years and still happening today of the biotech manufacturers working in partnership with junior colleges, with regular colleges in terms of developing different kinds of biotech programs. They might be, anywhere from a 6 to 18-month program, or it might be a full bachelor's degree. And it was something that we needed to do, especially in the earlier years. There wasn't people trained. There wasn't enough people trained to do biotech manufacturing. And so it was critical to have that, to feed, as we were growing rapidly. And probably those 4 companies that I had up there on the slide, all of them were growing rapidly. We're all competing for the same kind of workforce. And so we came together as a consortium and developed these programs in community colleges, and it's still happening today. Out in Devon's, I know another program started up, WPISCAP programs. And that helped grow the marketplace. Of course, when the students graduated, we're all competing for the same students again, but it added to the workforce. And biotech has come to the point today where it is a strategic cluster. It's grown quite large, and I think it's actually made the workforce maybe a little less in demand, because every company goes through periods of growth and contraction over the years, and so as one biotech manufacturer maybe shrinks a little bit, and they have some downsizing, all the people are getting jobs very, very quickly because their skills are needed. So that's helping the labor force in our industry as well.
If I might once again take the privilege of the chair, we have a number of members of the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative here, and one of them is Mike Tomasi. And Mike, I wonder if you could just say a little bit about the promoting manufacturing campaign we have, as well as what you might be doing at Endurance.
Sure, thanks, Barry. I sit on the collaborative, as Barry mentioned, and I'm also a member of the Governor's STEM Advisory Council. And I can tell you, in the last couple of years, in both of those scenarios, I'm on the promoting and public awareness activity. The Amp It Up program, which was launched in September, is an effort to create awareness across the state about all the positive manufacturing activities that are going on and how exciting it is for careers, whether you're engineers, machinists, and I have the same issue this gentleman has, attracting machinists to our company. And the ability to work with your local vocational schools, your community colleges, that is the feeder. And that is where the future is. And we all want our kids to go to college, but college is not for everyone. And I struggle with this at the STEM Advisory Council because everybody talks about feeding colleges and future degrees beyond, and it's great, but there are kids that just don't assimilate to that. And you can make great careers being a CNC machinist and moving on into engineering. So we need to promote that across our school systems, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our schools, whether it's vocational schools or high schools. The robotics programs that are taking place in the state are multiplying every day. And people are really becoming engaged, not only at the high school level and the middle school, it's now being pushed down into grade school level and pre-K level, believe it or not. There are actually programs, Weymouth has a program that preschool kids are doing robotics activities. So on the public awareness side for the STEM Council, I'm not at liberty to talk too much about this, but we're putting together a branding and a messaging campaign that is targeted to 5th, 8th grade kids, and then we'll expand higher and lower. So we're going to try to diminish the image that engineering is for geeks and STEM is for geeks, that it is cool, and that will be the whole focus. And we're very excited. We hope to launch that branding activity at the STEM Summit, which will be held at Gillette Stadium. I think it's in October. So we're working with a public relations firm in Boston right now. I had some preliminary meetings last week, and very exciting concepts and ideas being discussed. So now more than at any time in this Commonwealth, we are really addressing the issue. It's exciting because business and industry is leading a lot of this effort with education and government at the table. But for the businesses that are here, we need to get involved. And I preached this yesterday when I had the opportunity to speak at lunch at the Summit, Advanced Manufacturing Summit, which was well attended, but there was only 1/3 of the attendees were manufacturers. It should have been 2/3 manufacturers. And those are the ones that are active. So we need to spread the word. We need to take the investment and realize the return on investment that the government is giving us, because they are pouring money into these activities, and we need to take advantage of it. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Mike.
At the risk of contradicting my friend Michael, let me add on to what he said about promoting the image of the industry. I think we need to take a step back and look at the way I think Elizabeth is describing our challenge as an ecosystem. If you will, we think about the need for assemblers and machinists, and those are very important fundamental jobs and careers that we should be focused on, and we are. I'm very active on the same AMC, the Education Workforce Committee, and so that's a particular emphasis on behalf of the state. But I think there's a bigger challenge, and that is if you take a look at the industry as an industry and think of it as the reputation for the healthcare industry, if you will, and the career paths and the skills required, or the teaching core as an industry, education. Manufacturing has suffered from an image problem. We all know about it. Anyone who's been involved in it can understand and appreciate what it's up against today in the minds of mom and dad and Johnny and Susie going on to become manufacturers. Our challenge is to recognize that as an industry, there are very exciting careers. And if you're a young person and you want to change the world, get into manufacturing. 75% of all R&D goes into manufacturing. There are processes and all kinds of things happening cutting edge. We know that here. Massachusetts is the example of high-tech advanced manufacturing. Therefore, it is an exciting industry. And it goes beyond machinists. And when you look at a report that came out through the Donahue Institute a year ago, they examined in 2011 71,000 posted job openings on the internet in manufacturing. 4,000 of those 71,000 job openings were in the production field, the machinists and assemblers and so forth. The vast majority were in all the ancillary career opportunities that spread across a very exciting industry. And so, at the risk of putting all our eggs in the basket of production entry-level employees, we need them. We need to replace the 100,000 that will be retiring. But we should not lose sight of the fact that we're missing an opportunity to promote manufacturing as a global industry, cutting edge, that requires educational attainment.
At Kiva, we have made a real focus right from the start, and we're a young company, right? We're a small company. Some of the folks that work in manufacturing have been with us from the start, right? And as we continue to grow that group, what we've continued to do is we have something called Orange Week. It's our onboarding. Orange and blue are big colors. Orange is not a good color, and nevertheless, when you have to wear it at least. For Orange Week is a week-long onboarding and training, and I took it. And every one of our manufacturing and assembly people take it right next to us. And every new hire over the quarter sits for a week and has the chance for every one of the executives and senior leaders of the company to walk them through the product, how the product was designed, how our clients use the product, how we manufacture the product. Let's talk about what each of the functional areas, and everybody goes through this together. They do a robotics competition at the end, and everyone from the company turns out to cheer on the 8 teams or 10 teams, whatever. You see all the manufacturing assembly folks standing side by side with all of the engineers, and we are one big family. We've worked very hard to make sure that there is not a separation between our manufacturing folks and our engineers. We do a lot with bringing on co-op students, and we have co-op students out in manufacturing. My daughter is a co-op student. She came to me and said, "Mom, is there any chance there's an opening at Kiva?" And I found one in manufacturing, and I intentionally did that because I thought that would be a great experience for her. And she is actually saying to me now, "Wow, I really love manufacturing." So I feel like we have a role in showing how important manufacturing is within our organization and keeping it at the forefront. We've done a lot with Lean and Six Sigma training. We've had certificates through that training. We're continuing to teach 5S training. And we're not doing it where we're teaching to the workers. We're actually asking the workers to own it. Is who on this line wants to own the audits in the next 2 months? And we'll do the rotational program. So we're training people not only on the principles of 5S, but on how to audit 5S. And that it's a concerted effort that we're doing. We also have a tuition reimbursement program that we're encouraging everyone to take advantage of. So I do think that we have a role in making sure that it stays at the forefront of who we are and what we are.
From the higher education perspective. So I can't agree more with the gentleman who was talking about that connection and closeness between the business community and higher ed, community college up through four-year colleges and universities. There is an issue in higher ed where we're not always organized optimally to have the relationship and the discussions and conversations that will help you. What we've done at WPI is we've created a whole new division focused squarely on supporting the needs of industry and our partners. So our corporate education group, our career services center, our corporate relations function is all reorganized, squarely focused on how do we understand your workforce development needs, the education that you're not getting. So as we graduate students out of WPI, do they have the right skill sets to support your needs? Because when we talk to you, what we find is that sometimes we have to go back to our faculty and help them understand that the way that the curriculum is currently designed may not be hitting all the marks. So for instance, we just put together a biomanufacturing education and training center in Worcester, and it is a hands-on pilot plant that's going to not only help people with high school educations and two-year college educations come in and get skilled up, but even our four-year biology and biotechnology, chemical engineer students to get an access to the knobs and the levers and to see the process and to understand it so that when they come out, they not only have the theory, but they have the practice as well. So just a comment and a challenge to higher ed as a whole, that it's not just about, graduating students, it's really understanding where the industries are going and how we can support them.
One of the key things said yesterday is we have to make what we invent. And I guess the question is, what do we have to do so we don't lose what's being invented here? Because I was fortunate enough to do some consulting work with some venture capital people out of Boston. And as hard as I tried, I couldn't get that work done in Massachusetts. So I guess what is it we need that we have to look at? So as Mike looks ahead and other people look ahead, then I, Rose, and now Jay will know what to do. Thank you.
That's a great question, and I think it's spot on to the work that we were doing in that study I talked about. To develop, I've been in the same position where I'm with these companies and you look at their options, and it's very hard for a U.S. option to compete with some of the packages that are presented to them to do some of this work offshore. I think I see this in a couple ways. One is that we just are able to develop the capabilities that in fact you would, for whatever your product is and when you're trying to build it to the next scale, that we actually have the capabilities here. And that requires, I think that's part of what these investments in the ecosystem, investments in R&D, investments in the talent and the training, those are trying to build that capability so we have that there. I also think there is, at least for that slice of what we were looking at in terms of these companies, the financing side of this is interesting. I mean, we have plenty of capital in this country. No one's going to question that. But how companies can access that capital, particularly if you're building a long, some complex technology that takes a long time, 10 to 20 years maybe, to bring to fruition. How can you finance that, and how do we do, what's the structure for that? And I think we need to figure out, and maybe it's at a regional level, certainly at a national level, how do we compete with offers that a lot of these companies will get? I mean, from the Singapores and the Chinas. I mean, it's sort of very, and we're not going to become those countries. Let's not pretend that we're going to, be bankrolling everybody in the same way. But we need to provide options, and I think that's something I know that the White House has thought about. Is thinking about. Can we have a Made in America fund? Could we do some kind of mega funds? What can we be doing that at least provides an alternative for a lot of these companies in terms of building and scaling here? I do think there are a lot of forces working on our favor. The fact that the costs are rising in Asia, the fact that energy costs are low here, the ways that technology is working, and the direction in a lot of industries in terms of getting rid of the bulk of tyranny, moving towards smaller production batches, et cetera. That all plays to our strength in this country. So I think there are a number of ways. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. And I also don't think it's going to happen, with industries that have already moved where the center of gravity is elsewhere, we now are suppliers to those industries. We see a lot of those companies here. I think we should be looking at the next the next industries that are emerging, they are, ground them here and grow them here. Because that's the opportunity of the future, and certainly in biopharma, that's what, I think that's a huge opportunity. But it's in the other areas too, robotics and some of these other places where we have the center, we can keep a center of gravity here, we should grow it.